What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Maylari. So today's a very special episode here with my really good friend, Spencer Bono, former defensive lineman at Boston College. We graduated together in 2023. Now we're here at BC working in the athletics department. Going to talk a lot about the NFL draft today. We'll start out with our favorite prospects, talk about some mock drafts and some draft simulations we did through Pro Football Focus. But before doing so, I'm going to introduce Spencer here. Spencer, how are we doing?
Doing good, Joey. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, it's going to be awesome to talk some football with you. Obviously, you played football, high school, college, so you know the game to a great degree. So it's a pleasure having you on here today. But before we start, I know you want to just add a couple quick things in before we start talking to prospects.
Yeah, of
So
course. First, I just wanted to shout out a couple of our BC guys in the draft. We got Donovan Azaraku, defensive end. We got Ozzie Trapillo as a tackle. We got Drew Kendall as an interior offensive lineman. We got Cam Horsley playing defensive line. Jack Conley, Brykeese Brown, and Trayshawn Ward. All guys that are going to be playing the next level. We're looking forward to seeing where they end up and supporting them as they make their NFL journey. And also just wanted to say rest in peace to Kyron Lacey out of LSU, and Jeremiah Kelly is a freshman over at University of Cincinnati. They both unfortunately lost their lives recently. Just want to give them a shout out and just say rest in peace. And then now we can get to our favorite prospects in the draft.
Yeah, and I think everything was very well said. Obviously, the BC guys, we're going to be rooting for them, seeing where they go. I know Azaraku will be God's taken in the first round, it seems like. So I know there's a lot of great buzz around the BC program, considering he's going to be probably a first-round pick. And then the other guys will all either get drafted or be highly touted, undrafted free agents, whatever it may be. So rooting for all them to obviously succeed at the next level. And then obviously, yes, with Kyron Lacey and Jeremiah Kelly, sending our condolences to them and their families.
Talk more about Donovan later, but he's definitely been climbing up a lot of draft boards since the end of the season. I think more teams have been getting to know him as a great guy. I think it's very consistent with a lot of BC athletes across all sports. Is not only they're great athletes, but they're great people first. So that's one thing that's very consistent. I'm excited to see, especially where he ends up.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely will be cool, obviously, being a first-round pick. It's a great look for the program. So we'll dive in, as you said, into our favorite prospects. So this is regardless of average draft position, just some of our favorite players that we either watched during the season or we're watching after the year, just watching film, guys that we're high on or, that are underrated players that we are fans of. And this will be guys that are going to be first-round picks all the way to seventh-round picks. It's a wide range. So you'll hear a lot of different, potential value options. Some guys will be first-round picks, and there are guys that are under the radar, sixth, seventh-round picks, which we'll start off with one, which is my favorite prospect in the draft, and that's Nick Nash, wide receiver out of San Jose State. He's a guy that has a knack for getting open. He's always getting open no matter what the road is, whether it's, they're on the 5-yard line and they need a quick slant. He's always open. If they need a 15-yard in route to get a first down, and let's say a 3rd and 15, he seems to always be getting open. And I think what the problem with him is he played on a small program, San Jose State, so not a big-time program. And also, he's on the older side, so I know that's something that a lot of draft scouts and obviously general managers and front offices value, the age of the player. And obviously, he's up there in age, was at a small school, so I think he's getting underrated. He was the Triple Crown winner last year in college football, had over 100 catches, almost 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns. A very impressive season. He's my favorite prospect in this year's draft. I see him being, which I know he's probably going to go day 3 sometime, I see him being a very, very good player at the next level. I think he can be wide receiver 2 for a team within his first year, which I know it's high praise, and obviously you never know how guys are going to pan out, but just watching him play a lot at San Jose State, was a big-time fan of him. And obviously, would love to see him on the Giants, but we'll see how things work out there.
He's productive.
He is.
If to say the least, he's productive.
For sure, yeah.
My favorite prospect in this draft is Jahad Campbell, is a linebacker out of Alabama. A lot of great defensive players in this draft, but I think he stands out to me as just an all-around playmaker. Either someone who's going to make an impact on every play, whether it's in the run game, or that's in the pass game, whether it's in pass rushing. He had 117 combined tackles and 12 tackles for a loss, which is pretty good for a linebacker. He's very good instincts. You also see him playing quarterback of the defense very often. You'll see him directing players of where to go. Jahad, he is someone who's different than most players in this draft. I think a lot of linebackers in this draft are actually pretty good. I'll talk about a couple other ones later on. But I think Jahad separates himself not only with his athleticism and production, but his intelligence and football IQ, I think separates himself from the majority of players in this draft, especially linebackers. So I'm looking forward to see where he ends up. I know he's had some injury concerns. I think he had a rotator cuff surgery at the end of the the season, but I'm not really too worried about that. I think he has enough time to get the surgery, get it all cleaned up, and be ready for OTAs.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of him as well. Interested to see where he goes. It'll be somewhere obviously in the first round. My second favorite prospect, Harold Fannin Jr., tight end out of Bowling Green. Very similar to Nick Nash. Obviously a small school. Those are two of my top favorite football programs in the country. Obviously BC's there, and then San Jose State, Bowling Green. I watch the majority of their games, whenever they're on TV, and whenever I have a minute in the fall, I try to watch them play. And Fannin's a guy who has great hands. I think that's something he gets a lot of credit for, and that's the main reason that he got a lot of hype, in the draft, or I should say in the offseason, and now heading into the draft. His stock has fallen since the beginning of the offseason. In November and December, when the season was ending, he was getting a lot of praise, obviously, for his hands, like I mentioned, and his ability to run after the catch even as well. But the issue is, since November, December, when the Combine came around, he wasn't really great at the Combine, which has hurt his draft stock. And I think people are starting to look at him as, not as great of a prospect because he went to a small school, but I don't think that should take away from him. I think if you look at his numbers from last year, like Nick Nash, put up some big-time numbers, 100 catches, 1,300 yards, and 9 touchdowns last year, was a Triple Crown winner for the tight end position in college football, and broke records for FBS, single-season tight end receiving yards record he broke, the single-season receptions for a tight end in the FBS, and the tight end receptions per game. He broke all of those. Like a big-time player, really good hands. I know his Combine wasn't great. That's why he's falling in some of the mock drafts right now. But he's a guy I would still take if the Giants have the potential to draft him in the third round. I would love to see him in New York, considering he's a dynamic playmaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my second favorite prospect is Donovan Ezaraku. Obviously, at BC, a little bit of a homer there for me, but he's great. He probably has. He has the best arsenal of pass rush moves in this entire draft, in my opinion. He's going to work very hard every single play, whether he's rushing the pass, whether he's dropping, whether he's playing the run. No matter what he's going to do, he's going to make an impact in the play. And I think wherever he ends up getting drafted, they're going to be very happy. Yeah, I think he'll be a great player in the NFL for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very high in Ezaraku as well. I think when you look at Ezaraku too, he was here, he stuck around, stayed at BC, obviously put up big-time numbers this year, was the sacks leader, right?
In the ACC.
In the ACC, yeah. So big-time numbers, obviously, and considering he stuck around at BC, he's a guy that stayed loyal to the program. It's obviously great to see him have a lot of success this past year at BC. So hopefully, he ends up in the place he wants to go, which at the end of the day, I know a lot of guys when they get drafted, they're just happy to go anywhere. But hopefully he's in a place where he can shine, be in the right defensive system where he can put up some big-time numbers.
I'll be a fan of his no matter where he goes, so I'm excited to support him. So.
Yeah, same here. I'm excited for sure. My next guy, Jahad Campbell's up there. You already talked about him, so I'll move on to my next one. It's a wide receiver that I really didn't know much about. I took him in a mock draft, one of the simulations we did. It was yesterday or today. It was today, actually, we were running them. And this is a guy that's underrated, a wide receiver out of Memphis. His name's Rock Taylor. I took him in a mock draft because he was in the 6th or 7th round, and I wanted the Giants to take a receiver. And was looking at some of his numbers, and the 2 touchdowns is probably why he's fallen in some mocks. He's not really a highly regarded player, probably because of the touchdown production, and also I know a lot of people don't really talk about his ability to get off the line of scrimmage against cornerbacks that play press coverage. He struggled in that regard. I know PFF mentioned against Florida State that was an issue for him, but if you look at him, he's very good at tracking deep throws, especially over the shoulder. He made a lot of effortless catches, especially in traffic, which showed he could definitely make some plays, in some big-time moments, especially when, there are guys either grabbing him or, as I said, in traffic. He can make some big-time plays. At least that's what I saw in, the limited film that I saw of him today. So I'm excited to see what he does at the next level. I think he's going to be a day 3 pick, maybe 6th or 7th round. But he's a guy I just started learning about and just watching his film. He's a guy I'd love to have on my team, considering the ability to catch, in traffic, and then also his ability to track deep throws as well. Any team could add that to their offense and be happy with it. So that would be my 3rd guy and 4th guy with Campbell and Taylor, and I'll let you dive into yours.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Demetrius Knight Jr., who's a linebacker out of South Carolina. South Carolina had a very good defense this year. I think they have 4 or 5 defenders that are going to be, day 1 and 2 picks, which is at each level. So it's very impressive. And I think at the center of that entire defense, obviously the middle linebacker, Demetrius Knight Jr., he's very impactful at all levels. That's one consistency that I've noticed that I have in my favorite prospects is guys who can make an impact, not in one area. The guys were very versatile and dynamic. He kind of reminds me of Roquan Smith. I don't know why, just the way he is able to, it's like he has an eye for where the ball's going to be. Wherever the ball is, he's right there too. And that's something that I always found to be very important for linebackers is how are you going to impact the ball carrier, how are you going to impact the receiver that you're guarding, that you're covering. He's been phenomenal. He was great to watch this year, and I'm really looking forward to where he ends up as well. He'll probably be a day 2 guy. I expect him to go sometime in the second, maybe early third. But again, he's going to be a guy that I think will be in the NFL for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a great way to break it down. I think with South Carolina's defense, too, just had a lot of talent this year. So if you have a guy like, which all the production he had this year, you have a guy that can stand out. But they have some guys that are going to be first-round potential in this year's draft. So that might actually, which it helped obviously having, more eyes on him, obviously. But at the end of the day, that might actually hurt too because they might say, oh, there was a really good defense all around. So it's tough to be the one guy to stand out of 4. At Clemson, when they were really good on their defensive line that year with Dexter Lawrence and, Christian Wilkins and stuff like that, it's hard for other guys to necessarily stand out. But, the guy you just mentioned, though, put up some good numbers and was a guy that I know you're very high on. So excited to see where he goes in this year's draft. You think likely day 2, you said?
Yeah, I think he'll be day 2. I'd be very shocked if he falls. And you don't really see a lot of linebackers going to the first round. I think there will probably be 2 this year with Jihad and then Jalen Walker out of Georgia. But for me, he's in my opinion, he's the 3rd linebacker on the board.
Yeah, and South Carolina's got some guys that'll go either late day 1 or early day 2, right? Probably.
Yeah, they got a fair amount. You got Kyle Kennard. He's a defensive end. I'm forgetting the defensive tackle's name, but he's also very good, number 90. And they have Nick Emenwari, who's a safety, very big guy. He could potentially be a linebacker convert. But they have a lot of playmakers all up and down the line. So they had a really good defense. Going to be missing a lot of guys at the fill in next year. But I think a lot of them are going to be successful in the next level. So I'm excited to see that.
And that guy you mentioned, the hybrid one, I saw him a lot of mocks. He's kind of all over the place. Some mocks have him going late first. Some have him going in like the 2nd round, 3rd round. Like I obviously we don't know how things will play out, but he's a guy that obviously has gotten a lot of buzz, and maybe for his ability to play kind of the safety but linebacker position as well, which I know some teams actually like throwing that in their system.
Yeah, with his size and athletic upside, and then his playmaking ability, he's also, that's one thing I should say about Demetrius. He's also a guy that can redirect players to where they need to be if he sees something in the backfield he's not comfortable with. That's very important. I don't think people give credit enough to defenders on that. A lot of defense is aligning correctly before the snap. A lot of defense is reacting to what the offense does fast, very quick, and he's very good at that. He's also very good at making sure other players are where they're supposed to be, which is very important for defense. I think it's a very overlooked aspect of playing defense. Even if it's just 2 feet to your right, aligning on the hashes could be a lot more important for an outside linebacker or a linebacker than being a couple feet to the left. It really just depends on the defense you're playing and the offensive look you're getting. And he's very versatile at figuring out, what offensive look they're getting and redirecting players to where they need to be. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, and you watched a lot of their film, obviously, knowing a lot of those guys can be, whether it's a late day 1, early day 2, mid day 2 pick. So you watched a lot of that defense. You could see obviously he's the guy that was kind of the leader there. So great breakdown on him. The next guy I'm going to mention is Kevin Winston Jr. I know we both liked him, safety out of Penn State. Issue with him is he had some injuries and he only played a couple games this season. But when I watched this film, and even PFF was a big fan of his ability to tackle. Only 2 missed tackles in 24 games. Didn't watch too much. Just kind of saw a quick highlight reel. So it wasn't like I necessarily watch game film where there were some good plays and bad plays. And a highlight reel, you're only going to see typically good plays. But it was a guy that was an elite tackler, had a knack for finding where the ball, where the runner was going to go with the ball and finding the ball carrier, whether it's a running back or even a receiver getting a slant over the middle. He always found the guy. It seems like, and always had a great pursuit. So he's a guy I'm very high on. Would love to see him maybe be on the Giants potentially if they could get him, I don't know, in the 2nd or 3rd round. But the Giants have kind of beefed up their secondary a little bit in the offseason, so I expect them to probably address the offensive line, probably mainly in the middle round, like 2nd, 3rd round potentially. But we'll see, where they go there. I think with the game of football and playing the game, and now obviously with how much you've been studying it, from kind of the scouting side. having a great offensive line and a great defensive line is so important. And obviously, adding a safety can help, and adding a wide receiver and some of the other positions, like those are big time things. And obviously, when you can add that, a guy like Kevin Winston who can be a guy that can tackle and not have any missed tackles, that's a big attribute to have to a defense. But this Giants team, where they're standing, I think they need to add on that offensive line and maybe even the middle of the defensive line. That's how you win games is in the trenches.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd expect, if Kevin Winston's there, I would love to take him, but I think the Giants are going to address, the middle, of their offensive line, middle of their defensive line, probably, in those middle rounds, second and third round. But, we'll see. But I'm very high on Kevin Winston Jr. I think if he stays healthy, can be a very good tackler at the next level like he was in college.
Definitely, he's great. Two guys, both LSU guys that I'm a big fan of. One is Braden Swinson, a defensive end, number 4. And then you got Zy Alexander as a corner, number 14. I think they're both a little bit underrated. I think no one's really talked about how good Braden is going to be at the next level. People are talking about a lot of these other edge rushers. I think it's very popular. Every single draft is getting edge rusher, and he is somebody who I think is going to come in and potentially make an immediate impact. I think he's a very similar to Donovan. He's a very good weapons for pass rushing. He has very good hands. He's also very good against the run. I think that's also very key. People like to think edge rusher, can they get to the quarterback? That's important, but there's also a lot of other downs. A lot of teams are also running the ball, especially in the NFL nowadays. We're kind of seeing it reverting back to teams who like to run the ball a little more. It's important to have. People think he's a little undersized. I kind of disagree. I think he's about 6'4", 250, 260. I think it's perfectly fine. I think he's an immediate impact player. Probably be round 2, maybe round 3. He'll definitely be day 2. But I see him as a guy who's going to come in and make a defense better. So I think whoever gets him will also be very happy with that. With Zy Alexander, I think he's an underrated corner. He's big. He's like 6'2", 200. He's a guy you could potentially see swing to some safety if you need him to, which I think having the defensive versatility is very important. You see how many injuries happen every single year in the NFL. Having a guy who can play multiple positions and have that dynamic aspect of his game is really important. You can watch him cover very well, then you'll watch him go down and set the edge when needed. So he's a guy that you'll want to have on your team.
Yeah, and LSU's great at developing talent too, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
So
especially at corner. I mean, they always have some of the best defensive backs and wide receivers. So I'm excited to see where he ends up.
Definitely, ranging from Tyrann Mathieu all the way up to even the past couple of years, Derek Stingley Jr. and stuff like that. So they have a lot of great DBs. You're right. So excited to see where those guys go to. I know you've been high on both of them, and they definitely are going to follow where they end up going. So my next guy, I'll go with Ollie Gordon, the second running back out of Oklahoma State, who had a down year. I was very high on him after the 2023 season. He was a guy I mentioned a lot in the podcast about a year and a half ago now during that 2023 season where he was excellent, had 1,700 yards on the ground that year. And then this year, his yards per carry went down. His production just went down in general in the pass game, which he's not really a big-time pass catcher at all, but even that went down a little bit. And then also his yards overall, like he had 1,700 in 2023, only 800 just about in 2024. And you can blame a couple things sometimes. Sometimes the offensive line might not be opening up the same holes they did the year before. But also at the same time, you have that much of a decrease. Obviously something was up. He did still stayed healthy. It's not like he really missed, 5 or 6 games, and that's why his numbers were down. So I'm not really too sure. Like I watched some of his film, not really enough to really get a great basis of why his numbers went down. I don't know if it was necessarily he wasn't picking, the right, place to run, whether, it was the running through a hole opened up by the tackle on the left guard, or maybe he should have swung it to the outside. Like, I'm not really too sure what the main issue was with him. But based off that 2023 season, just pure talent-wise, especially considering he's probably going to go in the 6th or 7th round the way things look right now, which obviously guys can still end up going higher. He could end up in the 5th round. Who knows? I mean, every GM's going to see it differently. But I think when I watch him play, though, I still see talent, and he's a big back, powerful. I know he doesn't have like a crazy, burst of speed. It's not like he's going to be a home run hitter out of the backfield as a receiver or anything. Like I know in today's game in the NFL, most running backs have to be dynamic and catch out of the backfield, and he's not really that guy that can line up in the slot like, Alvin Kamara or Jahmyr Gibbs. He's not that guy who can kind of move around. But I still see that talent, and I would love to see maybe the Giants go out and get him as a powerful back, throw him in the backfield, in certain situations. Even if you're taking a guy in the 6th round, you're kind of just taking a flyer on them. I think talent-wise, he's definitely worth a flyer. So we'll see where he ends up going.
Yeah, perfect. Another running back I want to talk about is Caleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa. He's a workhorse. Obviously, if you're a workhorse, if you just start a running back for Iowa, they're a team that's going to play smash mouth football. They're going to run the ball up the A gap a lot. They're going to do some outside zone. And he's great. I think he is going to develop into a 3-down back. I think he's going to start out probably as a first and second down guy, as a bigger back. We didn't really see much pass protection out of him, just because of the way Iowa runs their offense. They don't do it that much, and if they do, it's usually going to be play action. There's a little bit of struggles there, but I think with the right coaches and the right scheme, he'll be able to develop into a pretty productive pass protector. So he's a great player. He's also from Cincinnati. This is where I'm from, so I'm a little bit biased towards my guys from Cincinnati. So I'm excited to see where he ends up. He'll probably be a day 2 guy as well, second or third round pick. And then on the topic of Iowa, they got Jay Higgins. Me and you both big fan of Jay Higgins. He's a little undersized. I believe he won Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. He's a phenomenal player. He's very productive. I think one of the knocks is a little quote-unquote slow. I don't know if I agree with that, but he's a fast playmaker. When he's playing on the field, he gets to the ball quickly. He has very fast instinct. He knows where to be. And he just makes plays. That's always it's simple. What it comes down to do you make plays? Do you have a positive effect on the play as a defender, as an offensive player? And he's a great player. I'm excited to see where he ends up. He'll be late. He'll be a 6th or 7th round pick probably, unless someone takes him in the 5th or 4th. But I think he'll be great. I think he'll be an underrated player. You see a lot of those linebackers who come out of Iowa, like Josie Jewell. I believe he's in Carolina now. He got drafted to Denver. They're very productive, a little bit underrated players coming out of college, but they just produce when they get in the NFL. They just produce, and I'm excited to see where he ends up, and I'll be definitely a fan of his moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to look at that Iowa team. You broke it down very well. Obviously, a very run-heavy team on offense. Then on defense, they always have a very good defensive front and the defense overall. And with Higgins, I think the main thing you pointed out and you showed me was his ability just to find where the ball's going to go. Whether it's a running back, getting the ball to the backfield, whether it's a quarterback that's going to, take off. He just has very great instincts, and that's the main thing you pointed out when you showed me him. Very good play recognition overall. 118 tackles last year, which is not something just to downplay. That's obviously a great year, and I know that's something me and you both respect. And also is very good in coverage, like 4 interceptions. And I think I always look at linebackers, especially when I look at the Giants, right? They haven't really had a linebacker that can cover in some time. Which Isaiah Simmons was kind of that, but he's a mix of a linebacker and a safety, and we didn't really utilize him as well as we should have. But we don't really have linebackers that can play in coverage. He's a guy that's going to be a 6th-round pick probably, and if you can add that guy to your defense and maybe potentially have him in a certain situation where the defense is going to throw, and maybe throw him out there just to, let's say it's a 3rd and 8. You can leave him right around the sticks. He doesn't necessarily have to be the fastest player. Like you said, I know a lot of people are kind of saying a weakness of his game is his speed. Speed doesn't necessarily have to be something that can hurt him. If you're playing a little bit back and you're playing around the sticks, he's obviously going to have some room around him where he can still run up and make a play. It's not like he's right up on a guy in the line of scrimmage and a double move is going to beat him. Like if it's a 3rd and 8, they're probably a tight end's going to go right to the sticks usually. Yeah. So I think he can be a good player at the next level.
As you mentioned, speed is very important in football and in every sport, but at the same time, so is alignment. If you know where to be, you don't have to be as fast as maybe someone who doesn't know where to be. It's very important to have that understanding of where the offense is going to be. And if you're able to predict it correctly, that's going to make for a great player with great instincts. And I think that's exactly what Jay Higgins is.
And what you just mentioned was, it kind of reminded me of Luke Kuechly. You said a guy that's always in alignment and knows where to be, which I'm not saying Jay Higgins is Luke Kuechly. But you made a great point that if you're in alignment, and you obviously are very good at reading offenses, I should say. And Luke Kuechly was great at that, was always in the right position, was very underrated, obviously, in coverage. Like, I think that's something he got credit for during his career. But now when I look back, like, people talk about Kuechly as a tackler, but when you watch Kuechly play on defense in passing situations, was very good in coverage. And Jay Higgins is a guy, I'm not saying it's Luke Kuechly, but can command a defense where he can always be in the right place at the right time, can be an anchor, in those passing situations. And obviously 4 interceptions is pretty good for a linebacker, especially today, nowadays. A lot of linebackers, which I know you were explaining to me the difference between a 3-4 and a 4-3 and how some linebackers are dropping coverage and others are going to pass rush. A lot of today's linebackers, a lot of them are going to be edge rushers probably going around and trying to pass rush. But when you look at a guy that can play in coverage too, that's just a great, attribute to have. So I'm high on him just like you are, and I'm excited to see, where he ends up in the draft. Even if it's the 6th round, he's a good guy to take a flyer on, I think.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So my next guy I'll move on to is Jackson Dart, who has gotten a lot of interest. A lot of mock drafts now have him going in the 1st round. Some have him going as high as even I saw the Giants taking him in a mock draft last week. Now I see even the Jets were taking him in a mock draft. I saw yesterday online. I think the interesting thing about Jackson Dart is during the season he was projected to be like a 3rd round pick, 2nd round pick, and then in the whole pre-draft process, after the combine, after all of his workouts, and after some interviews, now he's going, into the mid-1st round, even as early as number 3 with the New York Giants taking him, which I don't really see that happening. But I think the Giants could take him, but not at number 3, maybe at the late part of the 1st round if the Giants trade back in. But I'm interested to see where he goes. I think with the quarterback position, similar to tackle, if you have a real need at quarterback, just like if you real need a tackle, sometimes you kind of, kind of overspending, essentially, I could say, or overdrafting, where if you need a quarterback, sometimes you just take the guy because you think you just need to. I don't think necessarily the Giants should just take Jackson Dart just because they need to. I think he's a good player, but I think there is risk there. I think every quarterback in the SCS draft has a risk to it. I don't think either, any of these 3 guys, whether it's Sanders, Ward, or Dart, I don't think any of them are a home run, slam dunk player. I think Ward's my number 1 quarterback of the 3, and then I'd probably go Jackson Dart and then Shedeur Sanders, but I think quarterbacks are always overspent on, I feel like, and I know it's something we've talked about, which I don't want the Giants just to take him at number 3 just because, but I wouldn't mind them trading back into the 1st round, getting him at, let's say, 22, 23, and just taking a shot with him. He's a guy that likes to air it out, which is a stat I have here written. He was at 11.8 air yards per pass attempt this past season, so that was 8th in the nation in ADOT, which is a stat that just basically breaks down the average depth of target, so how far he's throwing the ball to his target each time he steps back and throws. He's not necessarily elite in any category of the game, whether it's pure arm talent. He's not really that mobile, but he has decent footing. He can move up and around the pocket. He's not really necessarily great at going through progressions. I think you can see when he is looking for that first option, that guy's open. He gets the ball a lot of the time if that guy's open, but if he has to go through his progressions a little bit, that can be a little bit of an issue. I know under pressure he had some good numbers. I know PFF was high on him in that regard. We'll see where he goes. I'm not really too sure, and I want to get your thoughts on maybe just the quarterback position in general, whether it's in this year's draft, and how teams just sometimes overspend. I know you love defense, obviously, and you play defense, so you value the defensive side of the ball a lot, but when you're looking at teams and front offices, what do you think the strategy should be? Do you just take a quarterback just because you need one, or should it be you value that player and you think, okay, this guy could be our answer?
It always depends. I mean, quarterback is the most important position in really any sport, let alone football. I think you see a lot of times, you see a young quarterback will get drafted in the 1st round to a team who really is not stable, who really is not up to the par in terms of how, what players do you have surrounding him? Do you have a good offensive line? Do you have good weapons for the quarterback? Do you have a good defense for the quarterback? It's very hard to throw a quarterback in there and say, okay, let's go play in the NFL, go turn these receivers who aren't very good into talents, evade as many sacks as you can. You don't see it happen that much. And I'm trying to think of the past quarterbacks who have been drafted in the, 1st round. Obviously, Burrow is the 1st overall. People thought similarly of Trevor Lawrence to be someone like that who would come in and make an immediate impact. And he did, but he's been struggling a little bit because of, it's not always easy to surround a guy with talent. If you make incorrect draft picks or you don't know how to pick up guys in free agency, it's tough. So this quarterback draft class is not too strong, but you see it every year. You see teams reaching on quarterbacks every single year because they know how valuable it is. And say you hit on it, like you hit on Patrick Mahomes. At the time, people were like, why did they draft Patrick Mahomes? Mm-hmm. And they drafted him, and it worked out very well for them. But at the same time, he went to a team that was very good already, that had a starting quarterback who can help him a little bit. He didn't start his first year. Mm-hmm. He came in played with some other very good players, and it worked out very, very well. It's very hard to just throw a quarterback in there and hope they do well. You don't really see it that much, even though it is the most valuable position in the sport. So it's tough for me to talk about quarterbacks, and if it's such a team sport. Football is such a team-oriented sport. If they don't have a good offensive line, I'm always key on the offensive line is the most consistent among championship level teams. good offensive lines is the most consistent from going back to the Jim Brown days, going back to last year with Philadelphia. You rarely see a Super Bowl winning team without a top 5 offensive line. It rarely happens just because how valuable it is. Having a good offensive line with good weapons can make a mediocre quarterback, look great. But also having a great quarterback can make mediocre weapons look much better. So it really depends on what you value. Ideally, the best of both worlds, where you hit on offensive line draft picks, and you're able to surround your quarterback with protection and great weapons. That's the number one thing. It's not as easy as it. Getting a great quarterback will turn your team around immediately. Happens sometimes, obviously, but at the same time, Joe Burrow isn't Joe Burrow without Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase isn't Jamar Chase without Joe Burrow. And a lot of them, this past year was probably the Bengals' best offensive line they've had, and they picked up and they hit on Amarius Mims. Short a little bit on the interior offensive line, which is also something that I think is underrated, having a really good guard and a center. Something that is very important for helping the quarterback. And protecting the quarterback is the number one thing. You have a guy, you're paying him all this money, you want to protect him. That's the number one thing. That's always been my philosophy, but, it's undeniable how important a talented receiver also is for a quarterback, how important a weapon is. Like, look at, for example, to go back to Mahomes isn't Mahomes without Travis Kelce, and likewise. So, that's football, though. It's all about having great players around you who will make each other better. And then you have to have a great scheme for those players. You have to understand what these players' strengths. You can't just throw a quarterback into a situation that you don't think will fit his strong suit. So that's a key as well. I haven't watched much on Jackson Dart. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the first round. I wouldn't be surprised if you see 4 or 5 quarterbacks go in the first round this year, even though most mock drafts probably would assume only 2, but you never know. I think in the NFL, this is going to be a very unpredictable draft. I really think so. I'm going to be very interested to see how it goes starting tonight. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how things go, and I think you broke it down very, very well. Like, honestly, that was a great 3-minute stretch of breaking down the quarterback position, and like you said, you want to set them up and have a good offensive line and good weapons. Also, the play system you're throwing them in, obviously the scheme and who the offensive coordinator is and who the head coach, that matters. And, I'm going to throw it to Daniel Jones and Bryce Young. You put those 2 guys when they got drafted in tougher situations, like the Giants' offensive line hasn't been good, for the last, 10 years since they won the Super Bowl, really. In 2012 was the last time they had a good offensive line. Didn't really have a number 1 receiver in all of 5 of Daniel Jones' first 5 years. And then year 6, they got Malik Neighbors, which obviously helped. But they never really had a consistent play caller. He had 4 play callers during his time in New York, and also had 3 head coaches. And Bryce Young obviously had a very poor offensive line in his first year. Didn't really have many weapons to work with, and I know a lot of people turned on him very quick. And then year 2, especially in the last 6 games of the season, saw a lot of progress there, which you got to give quarterbacks a little leeway. And so when you bring in a guy like Patrick Mahomes and bring him into an offense that already had Alex Smith, he can kind of learn the game, step back, relax. And when you go into a system with Andy Reid, it's going to be a quarterback-friendly system where he's going to set you up to succeed. Yeah. So obviously with a lot of these guys, if you're not putting them into the right situation, Patrick Mahomes probably is the Patrick Mahomes of the New York Giants. Do you know what I mean? He's not putting up big-time numbers. Tom Brady wouldn't be, Tom Brady, the Tom Brady was in New England.
And it'd still be great quarterbacks. Right now. It'd still be great, without question. But that just go back to what you're mentioning with coaching and scheming. Coaching in football, it's so hands-on compared to other sports. Not to say coaching doesn't matter in other sports, because it does, but football is where it's most important, and that's something that I will always I'll die behind that thought. I really do believe that coaching matters more in football than any other sport, just because of how hands-on the coaches are with calling plays on offense and defense, and having it's important to have, not only that, building a good culture. You have so many people, so many different personalities compared to a basketball team or a soccer team or a baseball team. You have 51 people on that roster, but it's not including practice players and everything like that. You have a lot more people to manage, a lot of egos to manage, a lot of different personalities to manage. So it's a lot harder, not only with the actual sport itself, but with the culture of the team, instilling a good culture. You're going to see a change from coach to coach, and a lot of coaches do it differently. Look how different Andy Reid is from Bill Belichick. They are both 2 of the best modern coaches the 2 best modern coaches that we've seen and they run things very differently. And both styles worked, but it works if you have the right personnel for your culture. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And I'd love to hear who's your next guy, because I know we're talking offensive line.
Yeah.
And we're talking, building in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line. I know there's a guard you're very high on from Cincinnati. I'd love to hear your opinion on that, which this is a guy we've talked about, and you've definitely watched a lot of film on him. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts on him.
Luke Kandra. To be 100% honest, I played with him in high school. I've known him for quite a long time. He's a good friend of mine, so I'm a little biased towards him, but at the same time, just watch his film. Watch him play. I believe he gave up 1 or 0 sacks this year. He makes an immediate impact on every single play he's in, whether it's the run or the pass. He can lean a little bit from a pass rush perspective, but at the same time, he's always in the right spot. He's very smart. He's extremely athletic. He ran a 4.9, about 6'5", I think 310, 320. Running that fast. He's very agile. I remember playing with him in basketball in high school. He could dunk right now. He's very athletic, very smart, knows where to be, and loves football. That's the key. I know him. I know that he loves football, and I know how much he wants to help a team win. That's what I've known about him for as long as I've known him. So I'm excited to see where he ends up. I've seen him in mock drafts anywhere from round 2 to round 6. So I really don't know where he's going to end up, but wherever he does, I'll be a fan of his moving forward. And then another guy, I know we both like him, Ty Robinson is a defensive lineman out of Nebraska. Similar build to Luke, but he plays defensive line. He's very stout. He's 6'5", 290, 300-ish. He ran I believe I was at the combine this year. He ran a 4.8, which is one of the fastest of all the D linemen. So he's athletic. He's smart. He impacts the play very positively every single time. He has very good hands, very good hand placement as a defensive line, which is very important. He's able to just push back the guard he's going against and either make a play or allow his teammates to make a play. So I'm excited to see, he'll be probably a, 4th or 5th rounder. Big guy, so, wherever he goes, I'm excited to see where he ends up as well.
Yeah, we'd love to see him on the Giants, and I know a lot of teams could use that type of player, a guy that can, clog up the run even, and also be a guy that could just be a big body that the offensive line has to prepare for. The next guy I'm going to mention is Quinshon Judkins, running back out of Ohio State. Strong physical runner. I know you like Judkins a lot, and I know a lot of people talk about Travion Henderson and Judkins. They compare the two. Judkins is a guy I think is a little bit getting underrated. I think Henderson got a lot of hype, which Judkins did as well. They both had big time numbers, offensive, yards per game, stuff like that, touchdowns. But Judkins is a physical back that I think could be a bruising back in the league at the next level. He's a guy I'm high on. There were a couple other running backs that I know got a lot of hype. Ollie Gordon's a guy that doesn't get any hype, so I wanted to have a guy that is a running back that's getting highly regarded, and that's Judkins. He's my favorite back, of the ones that are going to go probably day 2, middle of day 2, probably roughly sometime in day 2, and then Ollie Gordon's a guy that could go day 3. So I want to have a range of those two types of running backs. I think running back, even though it's not necessarily a position I value early on, like in the first round, which, it depends on the situation. If you're throwing a running back in like Jahmyr Gibbs into a team like Detroit that already had a good offensive line and a good offense, and they could just spend a luxury pick on a running back, that makes sense. Just like the Eagles could spend a luxury free agency contract on Saquon because it's a missing piece that they could use. I think Judkins is a guy that can be a missing piece for a team and add him into a lineup and be productive right away. Excited to see where he goes. And then my last guy I'll talk about really quick is Tito McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. He's a guy that was very highly regarded during the season, was top 5 in some mock drafts. Now you see him falling into like the 15, 20 range maybe. But he's a guy that can kind of do a lot of different things as a receiver. And if you look at the way he plays the game, really good hands. I think he's very good at contested catches and also with his body control. Excited to see what he does at the next level. And then I'll let you get your 10th guy, and then we'll do our mock draft pretty quick. But go to your 10th player.
Got Andrew Bakuba is a safety out of Texas. He's another high-level playmaker. You see anywhere from 2nd-round pick to 4th-round pick. Not much to say that I already haven't said about a lot of these defenders. He's the guy who's going to make an impact in the passing game and the run game. He knows where to be. It's very important as a safety, whether he's covering someone in man-to-man, whether he's in the zone, whether he's tackling. He hasn't missed that many tackles, and I think that's very valuable as a safety, someone who's going to make plays on the ground. That's very important. So he's a great player. And now we can get into our mock draft.
Yeah, and we'll run over pretty quick. We'll start off with our simulation, which we'll start with the simulation, then we'll get into our mock draft, which is simulations we'll run through pretty quick. We'll start off with one where the Giants are taking Travis Hunter at number 3 overall, and then, which I'll just run 1 through 7, I guess, and then you can run through 1 through 7 for yours. So I got Travis Hunter going to the Giants at 3 in this mock draft. We'll love to see him be on the Giants. I think he's more of a cornerback at the next level, and maybe, play some spot snaps at wide receiver. I think that ends up being the case if he's a New York Giant. I know he wants to play both ways, but I think it's just really difficult to do that at the next level and stay healthy. At round 2, the Giants are taking Jackson Dott at 34th. I know there's a lot of mock drafts that I'm going higher than that right now, but if he falls to 34 and the Giants have the opportunity to take him, you might as well take a flyer on him. I don't think you take a quarterback just to take him, so at number 3, I'm not taking Dott just to take him. But if he falls to you at 34, I don't see any problem with that necessarily if they think he could potentially be a guy, that could be a project at first that could develop into a starter. We'll see. In the 3rd round, I have the Giants taking Tate Ratledge, a guard out of Georgia. Didn't know too much about him, but I know the offensive line and the interior especially is still a problem in New York, so they could definitely use that. In the 3rd round, Ozzie Trapillo at 99th overall, a guy that I know you're a big fan of, Ozzie. You played with him here at BC. A big offensive lineman, 6'8", if I remember correctly. A big guy that probably could project more as a right tackle, a swing tackle probably, but I think he projected, maybe as a right tackle. He's a New York Giant, considering Evan Neal's been struggling over there. And then in this case, maybe you move Evan Neal inside and give Ozzie a chance at right tackle. And then I also have the Giants trading up from 105 in this mock. They're trading the 105th pick and the 219th pick for the 100th pick. And then I have them taking Harold Fannin Jr. Don't have to say much there. Big fan of him. Then I have the Giants taking Nick Nash in the 6th round. Don't have to say much there. I think he'd be a good wide receiver the Giants to take a flyer on. As I said, I think he could be a wide receiver 2 in day 1 of the NFL. And then I have the Giants trading with the Bengals a couple draft picks for the Giants to go up and get Nick Nash there at 193, if I remember correctly. Yes, it was a trade with the Bengals to go up and get Nick Nash at 193 from their 218th pick. And then in round 7, I have the Giants taking Jay Higgins, and I'll let you run over your 7 picks there, or 8 picks.
Yeah, I mean, for this simulation, I ran at the Bengals, so I actually traded the 1st-round pick back with the Eagles. So we traded our 1st, which is the 17th pick, for their 1st, which is 32. And to go up that many spots, we given their round 2, their round 3, and round 4. And the Bengals could really use impactful players at many positions. That's the biggest reason why I wanted to do that. So they got me drafted in the 1st round as a tackle out of Oregon, Josh Connerly Jr. He projects to play probably more guard in the NFL, which is what the Bengals do need. They have their 2 tackles, but at the same time, it's important to have a guy who can play multiple positions in the NFL. So he can play guard, he can play tackle, and that's something that we want to see for any team, really. And my 2nd round pick, I have the Demetrius Knight Jr. He's a linebacker out of South Carolina. I talked about him earlier. He's a phenomenal playmaker and a great linebacker. Same with Andrew Makuba, who's our 3rd round pick, our 2nd round pick, sorry. We had 2 2nd round picks after trading back. So Andrew Makuba, round 2, pick 64. And then our 3rd round pick is Dylan Sampson, who's a halfback out of Tennessee. I don't know if he slides this far. He was there in the simulation, so I took him. I personally think he'll be gone before that. But he's a guy, I believe, is about 5'10", 5'11", 210 pounds, he's just very impactful in the run game. He can also pass protect when needed. He's a guy that would be a great match with Chase Brown, who's the current starting running back for the Bengals. So have him going at 81st overall. And then our other 3rd round pick, we got Kyle Kennard, who's an edge rusher out of South Carolina. Big, very good pass rusher. Can play the run very well as well. 2 4th round picks. First, we got Ty Robinson, defensive lineman out of Nebraska we talked about earlier. And then Miles Frazier, who's a right guard for LSU. I thought he is very good as well. I think Will Campbell gets a lot of attention, as he should. He's very good as their left tackle, who might play guard as well in the NFL. But Miles Frazier, he's very big. He's also someone who could potentially move to multiple positions if needed. And then our corner out of LSU with the 153rd overall, Zy Alexander. I think he's a guy that'll just – you can't have too many corners. You can't have too many DBs, really, in the NFL. It's like you see these DBs get hurt every single game. You never know what's going to happen. And the receivers are so good in the NFL right now, you need to have defensive back depth. And he's a guy that has a very high upside as someone who can play multiple positions. He can play safety and corner if needed, given his size. And then with our 7th round pick, we have 2 of those. We got Caden Prescorn, I think I'm saying that correctly. He was Mississippi's tight end. And then Raheem Sanders, I'm a big fan of his, 246. He's a South Carolina running back as well. And just watch his film. He's someone who hits the hole very hard, and someone who could also be impactful on the team, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that simulation for both the Giants and the Bengals. I think they both address a lot of needs there, which would be great. And then Spencer and I did run a mock draft, and this is something we combined on right before we recorded this episode. So we have the even numbers being me drafting for the team, and then Spencer would be drafting for the odd number teams. I drafted the number 3 pick, even though that's an odd number. I drafted number 3 since I wanted the Giants draft pick to be, who I would want the Giants to take in this situation. So I'll run over 1 through 32 very quick. So number 1, Tennessee Titans, and we did no trades in this. It was just 1 through 32 with no trades at all. So everyone's drafting where they currently stand right now in the draft order, but we know obviously there will be trades. At number 1, we have the Tennessee Titans taking quarterback Cam Ward out of Miami. Not really surprised there. It seems like that's a lock. Number 2, Travis Hunter, a cornerback out of Colorado, going to the Browns. I think the Browns want to take him just because he's a dynamic playmaker, potentially on both sides of the ball, and I don't think they really want Shedeur Sanders. So maybe they kick the quarterback question down the road for next season. At number 3, we have the New York Giants taking Abdul Carter, an edge rusher out of Penn State. Would love to see him on the Giants. He's a guy I wasn't very high on early in the draft process, but the more I watched his films, the more I saw that he could really be a disruptor for that Giants defensive line that already has some good talent. Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, who they could potentially move on from if you take a guy like Abdul Carter, and then also you also add in Brian Burns. They have a very good arsenal of pass rushers there. And then at number 4, we have the Patriots taking Will Campbell, a tackle out of LSU. They're an interesting spot. I think they could go a variety of ways here, even a trade downs potential option. I think they could surprise, maybe take even Ashton Genty here, which, as I've mentioned before, I don't think adding a running back to a team that's kind of rebuilding, makes that much sense. I think it depends on the situation. Like the Eagles and the Lions were in different situations when they added Jameer Gibbs in the draft or Saquon in free agency. So I think the Patriots should go offensive line and shore up the offensive line to help out Drake May and obviously help out that offense just as a whole. That's been a major issue for them the last couple seasons. Then at number 5, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Tyler Warren, a tight end out of Penn State. At number 6, we have the Raiders taking quarterback Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado, which I think he still ends up going in the first round. I know a lot of mock drafts have him falling even out of the first round now or going late 20s. I think a team is going to stretch on, his potential value and take him, high still in the top 10, considering what we already mentioned. The quarterbacks, they're always an overdrafted position because you need a good quarterback to try to win. You don't win a Super Bowl with an average quarterback. That's the reality. So teams always just take chances and take swings on guys each and every year. At number 7, we have the Jets taking Tito McMillan, a wide receiver out of Arizona, which if they potentially traded Garrett Wilson, that would open up a need at the wide receiver position. I don't think that's something that they're going to do. I know Wilson will be happy now to be the focal point of that offense, considering Devontae Adams is no longer there and Aaron Rodgers isn't there, so he'll be that number 1 option like he wants to be, and he'll get a contract extension at some point. Then at number 8, we have Mason Graham, a defensive lineman from Michigan, going to the Carolina Panthers. At number 9, we have the New Orleans Saints taking Luther Burden III, a wide receiver out of Missouri. Saints are an interesting spot. They could even go quarterback here potentially if Shedeur Sanders falls. If they like Jackson Dart, they could go a variety of ways. But we have the Saints taking Burden here. At number 10, we have Armand Membo, a tackle out of Missouri, going to the Chicago Bears. I think this makes a lot of sense. They need to shore up that offensive line, considering how poor that offense was as a whole last season, because Caleb Williams really didn't have much time to throw and was under constant duress. If you added an offensive lineman, maybe that would short things up there. At number 11, we have the San Francisco 49ers taking Jahdae Barron, a cornerback out of Texas. They're another team that could go in a variety of ways with this pick. I think cornerback is a need for them. Obviously, even receivers a need potentially, considering they just traded Deebo Samuel. Offensive line's definitely a need, considering Trent Williams is getting obviously older and could potentially retire. So we could go a variety of ways here, but we went Jahdae Barron, a cornerback out of Texas. At number 12, we have the Cowboys taking Ashton Genty, a running back out of Boise State, who's a highly regarded prospect. A lot of people potentially think he could go top 5. The Cowboys wanted a running back last year in the offseason. They wanted to get a big home run running back, and they almost got Saquon Barkley, but obviously ended up missing out there. So we have them taking Ashton Genty here and taking a shot on him. Genty's a guy I talked about already in the past where I felt like in that game against San Jose State, the offensive line did open up a lot of holes, so I thought maybe it was the offensive line that, gave him some success this season, which I wasn't saying he wasn't a good running back, but I thought maybe the offensive line was getting undervalued, considering a lot of people said that offensive line was a big, big weakness, and that Genty was creating a lot of the, big plays on his own by his ability to, bounce off of contact and to find, the right hole to run through, and then also his ability to stay on his feet even when, multiple guys are trying to hit him at once. Does have great balance, a very good back. I did mention his offensive line as something that I thought was a little bit underrated, even though statistically it might not have been great. I thought they opened up a lot of holes in that game against San Jose State. I think he'll be a good running back at the next level. As I mentioned, I just think it's tough to take a running back early on. I know it can be a valuable position for a team that's in a position to win, and it can be a luxury pick where if you have a good offensive line and a good defensive line and already have a quarterback set up, sometimes taking a running back, can make sense. The Giants, when they took Saquon Barkley, they weren't really in either position, offensively or defensively, where it made sense to go and take a running back since they were kind of approaching a rebuild that they were already in for a few years. And the same thing goes here for Dallas. Like, they're not necessarily in a rebuild, but I don't think a running back necessarily, puts them over the top. But we'll see. At number 13, we have the Ohio State tackle Josh Simmons going to the Miami Dolphins, which offensive line is definitely a need for them. At number 14, we have the Colts taking Mike Green, an edge rusher out of Marshall. At number 15, we have Donovan Ezaraku going to the Atlanta Falcons. He's a guy we already mentioned a lot here on the podcast, but a guy we're very high on, and we're wishing him all of the best. At number 16, we have the Arizona Cardinals taking Will Johnson, a cornerback out of Michigan, who is a highly regarded player. He was going top 10 in some mock drafts. Now he's falling a little bit. In Arizona, could definitely use a little bit help in their secondary. I think they try to go with something there early on, whether it's first round or second round. At number 17, we have the Bengals taking Jahad Campbell, a linebacker out of Alabama, a guy we already mentioned a lot. The basically quarterback of that Alabama defense, a very good instinctual player. I think he'd be a good player in that Bengals defense. At number 18, we have the Seattle Seahawks taking Emeka Egbuka, a wide receiver out of Ohio State. Wide receiver is now a need for Seattle, considering they did just trade DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett has now moved on. They do have Jackson Smith and Jigba. They did add Cooper Kupp, but I think they could potentially go out and add a receiver here with this pick as well. And Egbuka is obviously an Ohio State guy. Jackson Smith and Jigba is an Ohio State guy. They play similar styles when you watch both of them play, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go wide receiver here. At number 19, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking an edge rusher and James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. He's a guy that potentially could have gone top 10 during the offseason at one point. A lot of mock drafts had him going very high during the season and then even early on in the offseason, and then completely fell down some draft boards. Now he's projected maybe to go late 20s, maybe even start of the second round. I still think he goes in the top 32. I still think he's a first-round pick, and Tampa Bay obviously could use some help on the defensive line. At number 20, we have Walter Nolan, a defensive lineman out of Mississippi, going to the Broncos. The Broncos could just go best player available here. They do have some needs, but defensive line is definitely one of them. Nolan, if he falls to 20, could make a lot of sense. At number 21, we have the Steelers taking Omarion Hampton, a running back out of North Carolina, who is an explosive running back, big-time playmaker at UNC. I think it makes sense for them to potentially take a running back, but I also could see them going in a different direction. Potentially, if Shedeur Sanders falls, they could take a quarterback, or even Jackson Dart if they want to take a chance there. I know a few years ago they took a chance on Kenny Pickett in the start of the 20s of the 2022 NFL draft, and that didn't work. They took him around like pick 20, I think it was, and that was obviously a miss. But you obviously have to take chances in order to try to make a run at potentially, winning a Super Bowl. You have to try to take chances and try to get the right quarterback. So it makes sense to take a swing every now and then. So if a quarterback falls there that they're a fan of, I wouldn't be surprised to see them take a quarterback, but a running back potentially could, ignite that offense. I know they're still looking for their next quarterback of the future, but if Najee Harris is no longer the answer at running back, you add in a guy like Omarion Hampton to try to make your offense more dynamic. That could potentially be something they do. I don't know if that's necessarily what they'll do because, as I said, if there's a quarterback there that they want, I think they could go out and take him. At number 22, we have Colston Loveland, a tight end out of Michigan, going to the LA Chargers, which would make a lot of sense. They need another playmaker in that offense. Ladd McConkey was a very good draft pick for them, especially value-wise last season. Tight end is still a need for them, and then they still could just use playmakers in general, whether it's a tight end, a wide receiver, a running back. So I think it makes a lot of sense for them to go out and get Loveland here at 22. At number 23, we have the Green Bay Packers taking Matthew Golden, a wide receiver out of Texas. Green Bay already has a lot of good receivers, but as I've already mentioned, you can never not have enough talent, especially at some of those wide receiver, running back, tight end positions. You can never not have too many playmakers. Like, if there's a playmaker there that could potentially make your offense even better, you're not going to see teams just pass on a guy because just to do so. If they already have good playmakers, but they think they could have an upgrade potentially, they could go out and get somebody. And Golden's a guy that could be a big-time playmaker for them potentially, especially with Jordan Love. He's a good quarterback. Did struggle a little bit at times last season, but I do think they believe in him, and I believe in him as well. As I mentioned, you can never have too many playmakers. You can always add more guys if there's a potential to do so, and I know that's something that Spencer saw there when he took that pick for Green Bay. At number 24, I have Malachi Starks, a safety out of Georgia, going to the Vikings. They're in a position as well where they could go in a variety of ways here, whether it's offensive line potentially, maybe even add another receiver, a defensive back, a linebacker. They could go in a lot of different directions here, but I went with them taking the best player available, in my opinion, and that's Malachi Starks, a safety out of Georgia. At number 25, we have the Houston Texans taking Kelvin Banks Jr., a tackle out of Texas who could potentially play guard at the next level. Considering that Texans offensive line has had a lot of moving parts over the last season, especially now with Laramie Tunsil being traded, offensive line is definitely a need for them, and I know Spencer potentially sees him playing as a guard at the next level. Still a first-round prospect, so even if he ends up transitioning to a guard, that could make sense. Maybe they start him at tackle and then, move him inside if things don't work out. At number 26, we have the LA Rams taking Jalen Walker, a linebacker out of Georgia. The Rams always seem to take defensive plays, and it always seems to end up working out. Obviously, we saw Aaron Donald. Last year, we saw Brandon Fisk. We saw Jared Verse. They always like to take defensive players, and it seems to always pan out. So I would not be surprised to see them take a linebacker here out of Georgia. At number 27, the Baltimore Ravens take a tackle, Gray Zabel, out of North Dakota State. Offensive line is definitely a need for them still. I know Lamar Jackson makes a lot of magic happen, even with, a poor offensive line at times. I know he's always, under pressure, but still making plays. I think shoring up potentially the tackle position, or if even he plays on the inside as a center or a guard, still could be a benefit for that offense. At number 28, we have the Lions taking an edge rusher out of Texas A&M. Nick Scorton, who is a player that could potentially go sometime early in day two. The Lions' defensive line and pass rush still could use some help. I think defensive line maybe more in the interior is what they would be targeting. But if a player falls to them that they're a fan of, especially a guy that could potentially go somewhere between 20 and 35, you never really know how to project where guys are going to fall. Scorton could go as high as 25, could go as low as, let's say, 35 or 40. Guys fall in the draft every year, and some guys are overdrafted just depending on how a certain GM sees it. But defensive line is definitely a need for the Lions. At number 29, we have the Washington Commanders taking a Michigan defensive lineman, and that's Kenneth Grant, which defensive line is definitely a need for them. At number 30, we have the Buffalo Bills taking Trey Amos, a cornerback out of Mississippi, which secondary is definitely a need for them. I know they just got Tre'Davious White back, but he's obviously getting up there in age. And considering all of the guys that have left Buffalo over the past year or two in their secondary is still in need for them. So taking Amos could definitely be a good pick here for them. And then at number 31, we have the Kansas City Chiefs taking Josh Connolly Jr., a tackle out of Oregon, who could potentially maybe play guard at the next level, but I think he's going to start out as a tackle. Offensive line is definitely still in need for Kansas City. I know they've been trying to figure that out for the last couple seasons. I know that's what Spencer believes is going to happen, where they're going to try to potentially, try to figure out that offensive line with one of their first few picks, and I completely agree with them. I would not be surprised to see them go offensive line here at 31. And then at 32, to round out the first round of our mock, we have the Eagles taking an edge rusher out of Georgia, and that's Michael Williams, which it seems like every year they draft a guy out of Georgia, so none of us would be surprised if they do that. And this is a guy that had a productive career, a little bit under the radar even. I see him going anywhere between 25 to 45 in some of the mocks. It's a little bit hard to see where a lot of these guys are going to fall. I think Spencer was right when he said this year's draft is going to be very unpredictable. No one knows where guys are going to fall in the draft, and who's going to be a high riser during the draft, who's going to fall into the second, third round that could have potentially been a first round pick. We see that happen every year. But there's our breakdown of our first round mock. As I mentioned, I did all of the even picks, and then Spencer did all of the odd picks. I did pick number 3 for the New York Giants, but besides that, I had all of the even, and Spencer had all of the odd. But that was a breakdown of what we thought could potentially happen in tonight's draft. We didn't do any trades because once you start doing trades, it gets to be a little bit hectic. So we didn't want to do trades here in our first round mock. And now for our last PFF mock draft simulation. Spencer's going to break down the Bengals really quick, and then I'll break down the New York Giants.
Yeah, so with the first round pick, the Bengals selected Jahad Campbell. I think he's the best linebacker in the draft and an immediate impact player on multiple levels of the defense. 17th overall. I think he's phenomenal. I think he can also blitz very well. I don't think he's not like a pass rush specialist, but he can definitely rush the passer if needed. It's definitely not something you want to always have him doing. but I think he is capable of doing that with his size and frame. With the second round pick, we have an edge rusher, Princely Umanmielen. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, out of Mississippi. He's a transfer from Nebraska. He was very productive this year. I believe he's about 6'5". He's very fast. He's a guy you can get in there on third and second down if you think it's going to be a pass, and you can really have him get after the quarterback. He can also set the edge quite well against the run. He's not one-dimensional, but he's definitely going to be very effective in the next level. We went very defensive heavy with this draft, as many Bengals fans and many people who watched the past season are aware of. The Bengals need to improve in the defense a little bit. So with the third round pick, I got C.J. West out of Indiana. He's a guy he'll line up as a 3 technique, can get after the quarterback, can stop the run if needed as well. But the Bengals also drafted 2 defensive tackles with their second and third round pick last year, and they're expecting a big jump from them. So having CJ in the rotation with those 2, along with BJ Hill, could be a very good rotation. And TJ Sladen, they also added him on, who's a pure nose tackle from Green Bay. With the fourth round pick, we got Luke Kandra. He's a homegrown talent out of Cincinnati, transferred from Louisville. He's a guy you've seen, go very high on some draft boards, go very low on some draft boards. But I think he's a guy who can come in there and compete for a starting spot. He's very mature, very athletic, very intelligent. So I think he'll be a great pick for the Bengals. And then for a running back, I think Khalil Mullings, Kal-El, I don't know if it's supposed to be named after Superman, but Khalil Mullings is who I have the Bengals taking in the 5th round at pick 153. He's a guy who's pretty big. I know he had a linebacker background. I think with the right scheme and the correct coaching, he can make an impact from a pass blocking perspective, and I think he could be a solid first and second down running back. And then with their 6th round pick, we have Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky, who's a safety. He can just make plays. He's a little small, so you might have to have him come in and play nickel, which I think he could be very valuable for, especially with the Bengals potentially moving on from Mike Hilton. That's the draft. No trades were made. You could see the Bengals trade back potentially with that 17th overall pick. I think if there's not an impactful defender, someone who you think is going to come in and make an immediate impact on the defense in that first round, I can see them trading back. But you never know how these things unfold. I'm going to pass it over to Joey for his mock draft.
Yeah, so that's obviously a great one there for Spencer. I think the main thing there for the Bengals is to address the defense, and that's something he did great there in his simulation. As for the Giants in this one, the Giants taking Travis Hunter at number 3 overall. I think Hunter ends up going number 2, so I think it ends up being Abdul Carter. But either way, regardless, I would take Hunter or Carter if they're there at number 3. As already mentioned, I wouldn't take Shedeur Sanders if I'm the New York Giants. I'm taking Carter or Hunter, whoever falls there, to number 3. And then at number 34, I have the Giants taking Donovan Jackson, a tackle out of Ohio State, who probably plays guard at the next level. The interior offensive line is still a major need for the New York Giants, so taking Jackson could definitely be a good value pick, considering he could still go in the first round at some point. At number 65 overall in the 3rd round, we have Iriante Ursary, a tackle out of Minnesota, going to the Giants. A really big guy who has a lot of potential to be a tackle at the next level. I think with the Giants and where they currently stand, Evan Neal just does not fit in as the right tackle. I think you end up moving him to the inside at some point. Iriante Ursary might be a little bit of a project at first, but it could potentially really pay off considering his size and his build. In the 3rd round as well, the Giants have a 2nd pick in the 3rd round at 99th overall. We have Chris Paul Jr., a linebacker out of Mississippi, who I don't really know too much about, but if I remember right, he was pretty good in coverage, where the Giants definitely need from the linebacker position. Then in the 4th round at 105 overall, with the Giants taking Ty Robinson, a defensive lineman out of Nebraska, which I know one thing is, I thought he was a little bit better against the run. I know Spencer watched a lot of film on him, so he knows more about him than I did. I thought he was a little bit better against the run than some of the scouts and people online, right? I know he's a good pass rusher and has a really good build. He's 6'5", really big guy. I know you're very high on him as well. The Giants could definitely use that, a guy that could play defensive tackle next to Dexter Lawrence, so would not be surprised to see them address that sometime in the middle rounds, round 3, 4, or 5. And then in the 5th round, the Giants have the 154th pick, and I have them taking a cornerback, Zy Alexander, out of LSU, who Spencer is very high on. I don't know too much about him, but I know Spencer was very high on him, and I trust his expertise. I think the Giants could definitely use an extra corner in this year's draft. I think Travis Hunter, if they do draft him, ends up being the corner opposite of Paulson Adebo, and then maybe Deonte Banks ends up going towards the inside in that case. But you can never not have enough depth. You can always add potential more cornerbacks, considering it helps having more guys for different packages, and also injuries happen. You also need guys on special teams. In the 6th round, the Giants trading up from the 7th round in the 219th pick. I'm trading 217, 246 in their 6th round pick in 2026 for the 196th pick in the 228th pick with the Buffalo Bills, or Detroit Lions, I should say. And at 196, I have the Giants taking Nick Nash. As I mentioned, a guy I'm very, very high on, my favorite prospect in this year's draft. Excited to see where he goes. I'm always going to be a fan of him. And then in the 7th round at 228, I have the Giants taking Ollie Gordon, the second, a running back out of Oklahoma State, a guy that I already mentioned that is good to potentially take a flyer on, just based off pure talent. I think the Giants could use him in the backfield next to Tyron Tracy. Could be a good change of pace back. Tracy's obviously the more agile guy and a good pass catcher out of the backfield. Ollie Gordon's not really a big pass catcher and doesn't really have the best of feet necessarily, but he's a very strong and powerful back who could be a good guy to contrast opposite of Tyron Tracy. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. As I mentioned, that 32 pick first round mock. I did all of the even number picks. Spencer did all of the odd number picks, and then we gave a few mock draft simulations we did through Pro Football Focus. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I know Spencer wants to wish the BC guys best of luck before we close, and then hopefully we have him back on again soon. It's always a pleasure talking sports with you.
Thanks, Joey. I really appreciate you having me on. I just want to wish good luck to my guys Donovan, Ozzy, Jack Conley, Drew Kendall. I'm looking forward to supporting you guys in the next couple of years and seeing where you guys ended up. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Same goes here on my end. Wishing them all the best. And then same thing with Trayshawn Ward, Bryce Brown. Really good kids. Wishing them all the best at the next level. But anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, Spencer, for coming on here. It's a true pleasure to be able to talk here and talk football with you, especially a guy that played football, was a highly regarded recruit, head office from obviously BC, Michigan State, Iowa, just to name a few. Ultimately chose BC, was a player here, and now as a grad student, working in the athletic department. So obviously you had a great career here at BC, and I know one day you hope to be in a front office, which I can see your passion for the game and how much knowledge you have. I can definitely see you working in a front office one day in the NFL. So wishing you all the best with that. We'd love to have you on here again soon. It's always a pleasure talking sports with you, Spencer.
Thank you, Joey. Appreciate you, my friend.
100%, dude. I'll have you on again soon. But thank you guys so much for listening. Much appreciated as always. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the draft, and best of luck to all your teams. Take care.